Hi, I'm Larry Wilson, and I've been talking to people about personal safety as opposed to safety engineering for 25 years. Now, when I started out, I wasn't very old, and as you can imagine, I didn't know very much. So I used to ask people lots of questions instead of just telling them what to do or giving them advice that they probably wouldn't take anyway, because for some of them, their kids were the same age as me. But one of the questions I asked was, what's the most dangerous thing you've ever done? Which was quickly followed up with, and what's the worst injury you've ever had? And what really surprised me back then was that most of the time, their worst injuries didn't come from the most dangerous things they had ever done, which was kind of the party line at the time, but rather, their worst injuries came from the things that they no longer perceived to be dangerous, that they had done many, many times. So, after talking to about 20,000 people over the next 10 years or so, I began to notice a pattern that was consistent with almost every accidental or unintentional injury that had happened to every one of these people, including me. And the pattern wasn't very complicated either. These 4 states, rushing, frustration, fatigue, and complacency, had caused or contributed to one or more of these 4 critical errors. Eyes not on task, mind not on task, moving into or being in the line of fire, or somehow losing your balance, traction, or grip. And because all of us have to deal with rushing, frustration, fatigue, or complacency on pretty much a daily basis, Safe Start isn't about the bizarre injuries that you see on TV or you read about in the newspapers. Safe Start is about the injuries that have happened to almost every one of us, like standing up and banging your head on something, cutting yourself with a knife or razor, slipping or falling in the bathroom or shower, punching or kicking an inanimate object, slamming a hand or finger in a car door, blowing right through a stop sign or a red light that you honestly didn't see, burning your hand, wrenching your back or straining your shoulder, falling into something or onto something hard or sharp, falling down the stairs, or falling asleep at the wheel. Most of the time, the injuries from these critical errors aren't serious, but sometimes if there's enough hazardous energy around, they are. So, as you're watching the following stories and reenactments, which, by the way, are all true, grab your Safe Start card and see if you can pick out the states and the critical errors that contributed to these injuries.
Hi, I'm Laurie Fox, and I just want to tell you about a few accidents that I've had lately. I was at work, and I was rushing to finish a project, and they needed something faxed right away before 5 o'clock. So I dash to the file cabinet and reach in, and I dig through, grab my stuff, and I turn and drop it on the floor. And when I did that, I bent down to pick it up, and without looking, smashed my head into the file cabinet, which I left open, and almost knocked myself out. It hurt so bad. My bump of my head's throbbing, and I'm literally nauseous. Then 4 days later, I'm at home, and it's laundry day and clean up the house day, which I don't particularly like to do, but I'm rushing to try and get it done and go down my list, and I go into the bathroom to get the laundry, and I think, oh, I need to, get some toilet paper out. And so I reach up into the cabinet and get that out and put it in my basket. I lift up with the laundry basket and smash my head into the cabinet door, doing exactly the same thing on my head, hurting myself again. In both instances, it could have been so much worse. If I would have hit the corner of the file cabinet or the corner of that door, I could have ended up with stitches. I could have had stitches, I could have blood everywhere, I could have had a concussion and ended up in the emergency room with both instances of hitting my head like that. As it was, I was lucky that I got out of there with just a couple of bumps on my head.
My name's Dovey McLeod, and I want to tell you a story about a car accident I had. I was involved in planning a function, and we were up all night working on it, and I was exhausted. I didn't get any sleep. So when I was driving home, I didn't realize how tired I was. The next thing I know, I'm in the hospital on a gurney asking, how bad is it? What had happened was I fell asleep at the wheel and went down the median and down a 60 to 80 foot drop embankment. And there was a concrete wall at the end, and I slammed into that. I was wearing my seatbelt. I ended up bending the steering wheel with my face and did a lot of extensive damage. There were pretty much no cars on the road because of the time, but I was fortunate. I had just passed another vehicle, and when he looked in his rearview mirror, he did not see my taillights. So he turned around and went back and investigated, and he found my car way down where it was not visible from anybody on the street, and contacted 911 and got the ambulance there. The surgeries that I had done that morning lasted around 8 hours. I had crushed the orbit of my eye, and my eyeball was hanging out. I had a big piece of glass wedged in between the nose bone and all the way down because there was no bone here. Because of the injuries I sustained to my legs and my feet, I was in a wheelchair for 6 months. It could have been worse, I think. If he had not found me, they say that I would have died because of the blood loss and the trauma, and because it would have been difficult for anybody to find me.
So, like I was saying before, most of the time, the injuries caused by these 4 states leading to these 4 errors aren't serious, and sometimes they are. But Safe Start does more than just identify the problem or the pattern that's involved in most injuries. It also provides 4 critical error reduction techniques to help you deal with this problem. The first technique is to trigger or self-trigger on the state so you don't make a critical error. Now what this means is that as soon as you realize you're rushing, frustrated, or tired, instead of thinking about why you're in a rush or what's going to happen to you if you're late, you want that first thought to be eyes, mind, line of fire, balance, traction, grip. If you were teaching this stuff to your kids, they're running for the bus stop, they're worried about missing the bus, what am I going to say to the teacher for being late for school? No, you got to get that first thought to be eyes, mind, line of fire, balance, traction, grip. Then you can think about what you're going to tell the teacher for being late for school. You get hit by a car on your way to the bus stop, you're not going to have to worry about school today. So that's the first critical error reduction technique. The second is to analyze close calls and small errors to prevent having to agonize over big ones. But again, there's more to that technique than just that. The third critical error reduction technique is to observe others for the patterns, the state to error patterns, that increase the risk of injury. This will help fight complacency, leading to mind not on task. And the fourth critical error reduction technique is to work on improving your safety-related habits to help compensate for complacency leading to mind not on task. Now, the workbook will give you more information in more detail on these 4 critical error reduction techniques, as well as some other important concepts. The workbooks are written in question and answer format, but it's not like it's a test or anything. And some of the questions are factual, but most of the questions are just basically the same questions I asked to that original group of 20,000. And the answers, which are in blue on the flip side, just represent what most people answered when I asked them that question. So don't worry too much if your answer is different. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that maybe your perspective or your experience is different than what happened to most people. For instance, one of the questions is, of the 4 states, which one is the worst for you? Well, most people answered rushing to that question. But that doesn't mean that rushing is necessarily the worst state for you. I mean, for me, it's actually fatigue. It just means it's different than what most people answer. Oh yeah, one other thing. All of the stories in the workbook are true. Back then, you wanted to make it into Safe Start, you had to be willing to tell me what was going on, or more likely, what wasn't going on in your head at the exact instant when you got hurt. In other words, were you thinking about what you were doing, or were you thinking about something else? And that, quite frankly, was the part that was almost always missing from the injury or incident report at work, and almost guaranteed to be missing from the police report if it was a vehicle accident. Okay, so take your time, answer the questions, all the questions on the page, and flip it over, glance at the answers. You don't have to correct your answers or anything, just maybe make a mental note like, and then move on to the next page. And I'll see you when you're done the workbook.